Good evening. We want to welcome you to today's program, Restoration of Honor Virtual Conference, sponsored by the Committee on Veterans, the Committee on Diversity and Inclusion, the Committee on Continuing Legal Education, and the LGBTQ law section of the New York State Bar Association. We'd also like to give a special thanks to SAGEVets and the New York State Division of Veterans Services for the collaboration and being co-hosts to this program. This evening's program will run from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Please note that you must remain online for the duration of the program to receive MCLE credit for your participation. Your name needs to match the attendance roster to provide you with your CLE credit. So please be sure you have logged on using your full name. If you aren't sure or you don't know how to rename yourself, put your name in the chat box and one of our staff members who are logged on to this program can rename you. During today's program, please record all attendance verification codes announced during the program. If you want to pose a question to the panel, you should use the Q&A box in the Zoom portal, not the chat box. Please do not put the verification codes into the chat box. Be sure to return to your learning dashboard at the conclusion of the program and enter all attendance verification codes in order to receive your CLE certificate. The verification form, course materials, and evaluation form are also available there. Instructions on how to access the learning dashboard are available in the greeting email you received earlier today. At this time, I would like to introduce Benjamin Pomerantz, member of our Veterans Committee, to give a quick word about the work that the committee does. Benjamin?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you very much for being with us tonight and looking forward to a great discussion. I'm kind of dual-hatted this evening, and so I'm going to speak with my first hat of the night, which is being part of New York State Bar Association's Committee on Veterans, which is co-chaired by Art Cody, Captain Art Cody, and by Jessica Parker. They have been tremendous collaborators in this effort in New York State about the Restoration of Honor Act. And in particular, shortly after the Restoration of Honor Act went into full force and effect, they were deeply involved in setting up a training program in which our division was honored to take part, focusing on training attorneys in both military cultural competency in general and in the Restoration of Honor Act specifically. And we have had the privilege of referring a number of cases through these great volunteer attorneys who have then reviewed them, helped veterans track down military records, and prepared the application for Restoration of Honor Act review. I'm going to put into the chat box in just a second the link to that training from the State Bar Association, and we'd be honored for anybody else who is an attorney who is on this call tonight to take that training and take part in this important work. So a big thanks to the Committee on Veterans, a big thanks to the New York State Bar Association overall for making tonight's program possible. And I'll turn the microphone back over to Ernesto so we can begin our evening's discussion. Thanks, Ernesto.
Thank you, Benjamin, for those words. And now I would like to introduce Ashton Stewart. Ashton is the program manager for SAGEVets, a New York State program for older LGBTQ+ veterans. Ashton is a combat veteran of the U.S. Navy and hails from a long line of military men and women. Since joining SAGE back in 2018, Ashton has significantly raised the profile of the SAGEVets program. He helped garner support from dozens of veteran service providers and institutions to support the passage of the Restoration of Honor Act in New York and continues to be a leader in promoting this legislation. And at this time, Ashton, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ernesto. It's an honor to be here tonight. And a big thanks to the Bar Association of New York State for sponsoring this program, getting it off the ground. This is our first CLE, so we're super excited to be here. And thank you for New York State Division of Veteran Services for your partnership. It's always an honor to be joining forces with you. And this program is definitely the biggest thing we've ever done together. So super excited. The Restoration of Honor in New York is due to the work of a lot of people, but I do want to just give a shout out to Senator Brad Hoylman and Assembly Member Dee Barrett for their leadership in getting this done and getting it passed and signed last year. I have great appreciation and admiration for our panelists who are taking the time to join us tonight, for their leadership in supporting veterans and for their courage to recognize the challenges faced by LGBTQ+ veterans who served prior to and during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So thank you very much. And without further ado, it's my utmost pleasure to introduce to you a friend and a colleague who will be moderating this program, Kristin Rouse, the Deputy Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the New York State Division of Veterans Services. It's all yours, Kristin.
Thank you so much, Ashton. And, thank you to the Bar Association. Thank you to all of the distinguished leaders and change makers who are joining us for this panel about this historic movement, historic policy, and the continued push towards justice for the wrongs that we've known that have been done in the past in our military. And thanks to everybody who is signed in on the Zoom, who is, you're taking time out of your evening to be part of this conversation and to learn more and to engage and to ask questions. So please do feel free to add your questions in the Q&A. Please make sure it's in the Q&A section. You'll see on your toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Click on Q&A. I think we'll have an easier time seeing your question if it's in that Q&A section rather than in the chat, because it looks like the chat is already pretty lively. So help us find your question by putting it in the Q&A as you have it. We have some incredible panelists this evening, and I definitely want to get right to that. But I would be remiss if I didn't touch on at the top of this program that, just this past September, we marked the 10-year anniversary of the repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy in our military that prohibited LGBT people from serving openly. I myself was affected by that policy for certain, and I definitely have clear memories of the timeline and the impacts, the personal impacts that policy had. But on that 10-year anniversary, the VA released what was sort of a restatement of existing policy, letting veterans who had been discharged under that policy know that there were likely things that they could be eligible for if they did have the time in service, if they did not otherwise have punitive barriers to those benefits. And so it was sort of a restatement of policy and also a statement that the VA was having another look to clarify those policies and to make sure that that those veterans received a second look, that they received the benefits that they're entitled to. And so, so that did come out, and it's worth noting. Ashton and I've talked about it. We've discussed it internally that certainly the VA is noticing what's happening in our states and the move that people are making towards ensuring justice for those who were done wrong. But we know that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was only one of many policies that resulted in unjust discharges, in bad paper discharges for a number of veterans. Over the years, we've seen veterans discharged under less than honorable conditions, the general under honorable conditions, the other than honorable discharge, bad conduct, dishonorable discharges, and older names for those discharge types, not only for anti-LGBTQ policies, and because we know that the transgender ban lasted much longer than Don't Ask, Don't Tell did, and also we saw where veterans had PTSD because of their service, but it might not have been recognized at the time, and they may have been punished for it, and they may have exhibited behavior related to that PTSD that wasn't understood at the time, and they were put out on some sort of punitive or administrative discharge that punished them for that misunderstood or mistreated condition. The same with individuals who might have reported sexual misconduct or harassment. They might have suffered violence, sexual violence in the course of their military experience, and instead of the perpetrator being punished, they themselves were punished and put out on less than honorable discharges. We also see conduct stemming from unrecognized or untreated traumatic brain injury that might look similar to what I just mentioned about PTSD. And also, we know that all of these unjust discharges disproportionately were meted out to to veterans of color, and that institutional racism has certainly played out, at least going back to World War II and prior to that, in terms of unjust discharges from the military. And so in order to address all of these historic wrongs, we're seeing so much policy crop up at the state and local levels, because service providers, like many of you who are on this call, you're seeing what's wrong. You're seeing the unjust treatment. You're seeing the honorable service that wasn't labeled as such, and the barriers to benefits and to vital benefits and resources that they would otherwise be entitled to. And so, so I thank you all for that important work and for being part of the change that we're seeing starting to get at the federal level. There is pending legislation in Washington that mirrors what we're talking about, but it's not yet passed. And but at least VA, we know, is taking a look at their policies as they exist and hopefully clarifying. But I want to talk about what all of you have done here on this panel. So let me get a flag. Are we limited? So I do want to respect everyone's time, and we have folks who may have to depart before the end of the panel. But so I want to go first to Representative David Ortiz from Colorado, who represents the 38th District of Colorado, who can talk about the legislation that was just signed this past April. So really, really new and exciting stuff in Colorado. But Representative Ortiz, if you could talk about what led you to this work, what led to the introduction of this restoration of honor legislation, and please let us know. Please take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing you got to know about me is I'm third generation service member. That's kind of why you see a bunch of stuff on the wall behind me. It's my grandfather and my dad and my uncle. Going back to World War II, infantry in the Army, and then my dad was Air Force Academy grad of '79. I myself served as a bisexual man under DOTA, under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, starting in 2008. And look, I will be honest, like there's some privilege of being the B part, is that we can be normalized, or it's just easier to integrate, which doesn't make it right. So that's kind of a little bit of my background where I started the work. I actually survived a crash when I was in Afghanistan in 2012 that brought me to Colorado. And that's why, eventually led me to run for office here. I ran it with Senator Moreno, counterpart in the Senate. He himself is not a veteran, but he's definitely a leader in the LGBTQ plus community. So it was great to run the bill with him. So the brass tacks of what this bill does is if you served honorably, but were drummed out simply for being a member of the LGBTQ plus community, it restores state veteran benefits. That's the only thing that we can control here. And so what that includes is access to the Teach Colorado grant initiative, in-state tuition, access to be interred at veteran cemeteries, Colorado state plates that honor certain service members based on, what unit you were in or branch, different awards you might have. You could get now access to employment benefits if you're applying for certain state jobs, getting certain extra points based on that service. You get access to fish and wildlife permits, as well as to Colorado state parks for the month of August. That sounds kind of small scale. I think employment is the biggest thing. In-state tuition is the biggest thing. And let's not underestimate what it means to be able to be interred with some of your brothers and sisters that you served with at the end of your life, able to have access to the cemeteries. But really part of what we were told and what we were pushing for is that passing these in individual states is sending a message to our federal counterparts that we need to streamline the process to get access to federal benefits. I think 2014 or 15 was the first time they were trying to pass a law to streamline access for LGBTQ plus veterans to federal benefits, and it's been sitting there languishing ever since. We need to get this done. It's time to get done. And I think we're sending a clear message as we pass state versions of this law across the country. So that's the down and dirty short of it, of what we did here. And it did take effect on 11 November 2021 on Veterans Day. That was not by accident. So.
And Representative, if you could talk about, is there any veteran who's been positively impacted yet? I know Veterans Day was literally last week. Have there been any announcements yet of these restored benefits within Colorado?
Yeah, that falls into the department, and we usually get presentations and briefings from each individual department, depending on what committee you sit in on. Even though I'm not on the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, I usually try and go to those meetings. So that will be the first report that comes out on the number and who is being positively impacted by this. So for now, I do not have any specific numbers and answers, but once they present to us, the department will let us know how this is turning out and who's being impacted.
And this is, hot off the presses, so this is really an exciting time to get to talk with you. Did you find any surprises, like just in the process of, things that just surprised you and maybe pushback that you got on the bill, or people who wanted to tell their story, or, were there any standouts to you as you've worked through this process?
I mean, I want to say that our tag, the commanding general for the National Guard, is the first commanding general of the LGBTQ plus community. So that also played a factor in why this took a priority. I mean, I would like to say that we didn't get any pushback, but who would be surprised by me saying that we did? And unfortunately, it came from some of my brother veterans on the other side of the aisle. Although I will also say, I think there's like 6 of them. 4 out of the 6 were overwhelmingly in support of this bill. So that was nice to be able to stand in unity from both sides of the aisle. Because let's be honest, LGBTQ plus have been serving in this country's military since the Revolutionary War. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I will say is it impacted me and other veterans, even if they didn't identify as that, because, and I think also like veterans of color, because they're used to the idea that you love a country and you serve a country that might not always love you. And to me, I think that's the most impactful and powerful part is we have segments of our country, whether it's LGBTQ plus, whether it's the community of color, that will raise their right hand and fight and die for this country, even though segments of it do not love them back. But I will say that there's a large segment that is very supportive. And to be frank, we decide to raise our right hand to serve because of the promise of what this country can be. And for that segment that recognizes the contributions that we bring. So I think that was the most impactful, was to see the majority of brother and sister veterans, whether they identified with this segment of the community or not, sit and stand. I say sit because I live life in a wheelchair, but sit and stand with us in unity. I think that was what was most impactful for me.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. And I know, I've said many times, like, if I could have told myself 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that this day would come where you could tell this story. And I mean, and for you to be leading that change in your state and to have such a powerful experience. I mean, that's like, what an amazing moment to get to be part of. Is there other work that you believe needs to be done in this arena?
Again, my focus now is working with my federal delegation. I have the privilege of being represented by Congressman Jason Crow, who was a Ranger himself. He is a Democrat. So trying to work with our federal delegation here from the state of Colorado to make sure that we are finally getting that bill passed that streamlines the efforts on the federal level to give access to federal VA benefits. Because let's be real, that's where the real meat is, right? Like that's what it really is. And it's not just about the benefits. Let's be real, Frank. It's about being able to feel valued and proud of your service again, and having private conversations with LGBTQ plus veteran, especially those during the Lavender Scare, before DOTA and the way they were driven out. There was really a desire just to forget about their service and I don't want to say embarrassment, but a shame that they were made to feel, and through no fault of their own, just to want to feel at peace with what they did and their service again. I think that's kind of the bigger part. Yes, access to VA healthcare and federal benefits, that's critical, don't get me wrong. But I really want this community to be able to find peace and to be proud of their service and feel that pride reciprocated back. Because look, I'm going to tell you, as a brother veteran, I'm proud of you all, especially if you were serving under a time when your country didn't love you back. That
is so powerful. And I know that means a lot to me personally. And I know that that those words alone I think are healing to so many people, but to actually see the leadership, visible leadership, and to make such powerful change, and to to restore what is possible at the state level, to restore that dignity, to restore that sense of honor and pride, and to bring people out of the shadows, like you're saying, to say it's time. You know, what you knew was wrong the whole time, we're trying to change that now, and that's really such an incredible thing. Representative Ortiz, I know you need to drop off. Do you have any final words that you wanted to share with the panel before we go to the broader conversation with everybody?
No, I just want to thank the panelists and all those involved that did the work in New York and that are helping us do the work across the country, because it's well past time. I mean, let's look at the fact that we just are coming out of an administration that implemented a transgender service ban. And the bottom line is, it should not matter who you love or how you identify. The fact that you are willing to be the less than 1% to raise your right hand and swear an oath to the Constitution, something that I think, given the last administration, means more than we ever realized, because I think we've taken it for granted a little bit after the 6th of January. I think the work that y'all are doing across the country to make sure that on the state level we can do this, but also to put additional pressure on the federal level, cannot be understated. So thank you for all of your work. I am humbled to be a part of this, and I'm excited to keep the work going.
Oh, and please keep in touch, everybody. Please keep in touch, and let's all follow this progress. And so, thank you so much, Representative Ortiz. We'll see you soon. And so next, I want to talk with another state that is pioneering with change on many fronts, but definitely with restoring state benefits to veterans who've been unjustly discharged. I'd like to introduce Commissioner Tom Soddy, an Army veteran, another Army veteran. I'm an Army veteran too. So we're, go Army this evening. Tom Soddy, Commissioner for the Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs. Commissioner, could you walk us through, the origins of the legislation in your state and some of the story behind it and where you're at?
Absolutely. I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully I will do this successfully. We practice it beforehand.
Great.
And let me and just give me are we good to go with the screen?
Yep.
Kristin,
I can see it. I hope everyone else can see it.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank Ashton Stewart and Ben Pomerantz for reaching out to me to include me in this conference, and to the sponsoring organizations, Division of Veteran Services, New York Bar Association, and SAGE. Thank you for doing this. So I became acting commissioner in October of 2017 in Connecticut, and when the previous commissioner resigned for professional reasons to seek other employment. At that time, there was a grassroots effort happening in Connecticut, and where some veterans and advocates in the community were reaching out to veteran service organizations and to legislators. And then I started getting the inquiries and contacts. State Representative, then Brian Oler, and himself an Army veteran, Steve Kennedy, an Army veteran who was a team leader in Afghanistan and Iraq Veterans of America, and the Yale Law Clinic, who we had worked with in the past on veterans advocacy issues in New Haven. And through those discussions, the initial legislation, and Connecticut really took this in two steps that took about 3 years, was Senate Bill 284. And from the title, you can see it was a limited bill. It was to address the issue of individuals who received an OTH based on PTSD, TBI, or who had experienced military sexual trauma. Shortly after working with the legislators and the advocates, I began to hold meetings with statewide veteran service organization leaders, the Department of Veterans Affairs and Connecticut Board of Trustees, to sort of get their sense of where they were on this issue and to help educate them as to why this was so important. And there were two individuals who really spoke about this at the public hearing, as well as two veteran service organizations. I just want to highlight one. His name has been in the press, so I'm not disclosing anything. Tom Burke, who was a former Marine. He had done 3 tours, and on his last tour, he had witnessed something incredibly horrific with regard to an IED and children in Afghanistan that he had worked with and helped to improve their living conditions. As a result of that, he began to self-medicate with marijuana and possibly other substances. And as a result of that self-medication, he received an other than honorable and was sent home without that recognition that he deserved for his 3 tours of duty. And so Tom really stood out as an example that we could show to some of those naysayers in the community who were concerned about this. And when some people brought up the issue of money, we said this should never have to do with what the fiscal note will be on the legislation, because I know that's what many people, many states who are introducing this forget. How much will this cost? If it's the right thing to do, it really shouldn't matter. And candidly, it is de minimis compared to the impact that it will have in a positive way. So that bill became law, Public Act 1847, and it was the first of its kind in the country. And we hope that Connecticut would be, a model and lead the way, and other states would follow. And sure enough, in less than a year, New York followed. Not only did New York follow, but they went even further. And New York then included the issue of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And so that second step, Connecticut, I just by coincidence happened to be mobilized to active duty in New York at the time, north of Albany. And I met some of the legislators and advocates who had passed that legislation. And, we shared information and them saying that, no issue of plagiarism here. We then took a second step in Connecticut this session in 2021, House Bill 5592. Now, this was sort of an odd title, an act of redefining veteran. That I didn't title the bill. I helped to introduce along with the co-sponsors who are LGBTQ plus themselves, but to establish actually a board of review within the DVA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, that would review this, but to expand to include gender identity, sexual orientation, and gender expression. And the board that was established pursuant to Public Act 2179, passed earlier this year, establishes a qualifying review board that we refer to as the Eligibility Qualifying Review Board, the EQRB. And the EQRB addresses those new situations as well as the previous three conditions. We're very careful, and members of the LGBTQ plus community said, Commissioner, you need to change the law because it said conditions. Being LGBTQ is not a condition. It's a state. It's a circumstance that resulted in an OTH for some. So we were very careful with fashioning the legislation to be sensitive to those issues. And it consists of 5 members, 3 who are appointed by myself as commissioner. 1 is a member of our board of trustees appointed by the chairperson of our board of trustees. And the other one is our manager of advocacy and assistance. And it's the restoration of state-based benefits, as Representative Ortiz very succinctly put forward. It does not, as we all should know, grant any federal recognition. And unfortunately, if you have a state cemetery that is federally funded, you're limited by the federal definition. So state veteran cemeteries can bury under this law, but in Connecticut, we only have a federally recognized state cemetery, so we do have limitations there. Very quickly, I'll run through some of the administrative procedures. I think this is important for people to understand, and I did plagiarize a reasonable amount from New York. I want to thank Joel Evans, Ben Pomerantz, and others for their assistance. We established a board because in Connecticut, we do not have a legal services division within the Department of Veterans Affairs. I have 1 attorney. So we figured the best way to do it would be to have a board of subject matter experts. And so when someone does submit an application, within 30 days, the board will meet, render that decision. We'll docket it and render that decision. That decision is a recommendation. The recommendation is based upon our standard of proof, which is if the applicant demonstrates that one of the 5 conditions or circumstances was a primary cause leading, or if any way was based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, then the board is to recommend restoration of state veterans benefits to whoever is commissioner at the time. The commissioner then issues a final decision based on the recommendation of the EQRB within 10 days of receiving that recommendation. If an applicant is denied restoration of rights, either by the board or by the commissioner overruling the board, then they can file a request for reconsideration to the agency, to myself, and the commissioner has to rule on that. If that final decision is adverse to the applicant, they have a right under the Administrative Appeals Act in Connecticut for 183 to file an appeal directly to the Superior Court within 45 days. And so filing the actual application, whether it's online or by mail, we're trying to avoid fax, but we want to give individuals every opportunity to file. They could even deliver it to the agency. It's a signed personal statement explaining the factual basis as to why they believe the assigned character was unjust. copy of the underlying documents, as well as their OMPF. Now, if someone is unable to, in a timely fashion, get their entire file, the board will obviously consider those circumstances. And one of our veteran service officers will assist the individual in getting the documents necessary for the board to conduct the review. And then any other documents. Now, the medical and or clinical documents are only related to PTSD and TBI, not to the other circumstances. So I just wanted to make that clear. And any other documents that may support, including a disability service rating by the federal VA. So applicants who are claiming one or more of the mental health conditions, and I don't like to call them mental health conditions. That's just the way the statute reads, PTSD or TBI. That's where we require a medical diagnosis and relevant supporting documentation from a clinician or from the OMPF, where it is clear that the individual most likely had one of the conditions, TBI or PTSD, that then resulted in the OTH. And then any additional supporting documentation, any personal statements of someone who has direct knowledge of that person's good conduct while they're in the military, and that can support the EQRB's determination that it wasn't something else that took place, either in the OMPF or that other documents show that took place that resulted in the OTH as opposed to one of the underlying conditions or circumstances. Now, this is, we try to keep it very straightforward. This is the application. Now, it obviously, there'll be supporting documentation submitted. The OMPF can be somewhat voluminous, depending on the length of career and what the underlying circumstances were. But we try to keep it very straightforward for individuals to be able to file this. And it's really heavily reliant on that personal statement and some of that supporting documentation. Now, a go live on this. Our EQRB is going to be go live. We have all 5 members appointed. They are all veterans. 3 identify as male, 2 as female, one of whom is African American. They are now completing their training on a Teams platform for collaboration online and document sharing. The key thing here is because this is a board and they are not employees of the state, we can't allow them to use their private email or their private phones. Everything has to be on a state platform, subject both to the Freedom of Information Act as well as any protections under HIPAA and other privacy, person identifying information statutes and regulations. So we're training them on how to collaborate and to have virtual meetings as well as in-person meetings to share the documentation, render their decision. Our web page, the page on our website will go live on 1 December. This is 1 month prior to the deadline set by the legislature for the board to be active by 1 January. We wanted to get it done as early as possible. That day will also be where we'll hold a press conference at our main campus in Rocky Hill to include the co-sponsors of the bill, neither of whom are veterans, but both of whom are members of the LGBTQ+ community, as well as veteran advocates, the legislative leaders from the General Assembly's VA committee, as well as members of the EQRB board to answer any questions of the press and to really get the word out. There is, I think, so much of a problem of there's not a lack of benefits. And with these new state veteran benefits legislation, I think the problem is connecting veterans with those benefits, getting the word out in the underserved community, in the community of color who has been disproportionately affected by these, who may not have that regular connectivity, both virtual as well as with service organizations because of the OTH. So that's what we really need to do is communicate far and wide and through every platform available. So once we have that press conference, I will then be sending out blast emails with educational material to every municipal chief elected official, every state agency, and every congressional office in the state of Connecticut, and any board or commission that has jurisdiction over any state-based veterans benefits, to educate them on this, to show them the forms so that they know when that veteran then receives what's called a letter of determination that says your service for state-based purposes is now considered honorable. That agency, that town clerk, that tax assessor knows that that is legitimate. And so that's basically the overview. Now, just anticipating a question, where did we run into issues? Even before we went to the broader expanded legislation of this year, those first 3 conditions, there was some pushback. There were those some of the older vets who said, well, how are you going to know that this is true? And, what is going to be that standard of proof? And Commissioner, people are going to just say that this is what happened, that they have PTSD. Well, I don't really think that there would be a great, flood of people falsifying, making false statements under oath to whether it was at the time just a clinician or now to the EQRB. And over time, in a fairly short period of time, in about 3 to 6 months, we were able to win over most of the state-wide veteran service organization leaders and their down-trace members, to where by the time we got to 2021, now we're expanding it to include LGBTQ plus and who had been discriminated against, there was very little opposition. In fact, there was broad support for it, and it passed really without a lot of controversy. And to the point that Representative Ortiz made, and I think also Ms. Rouse, you mentioned this, I apologize if you didn't, the feeling of being valued. There was a veteran who, under the previous legislation, had his state-based benefits restored. And at the press conference, this was Mr. Burke, he said, in a very emotional statement, that it was the first time since he had come home with that OTH that he felt that he could refer to himself as a veteran and be able to wear his cap and join an organization if they would allow it, but get those state benefits. But it wasn't about the benefits. It was about being valued. And that certainly applies to those in the LGBTQ community who have been discriminated against for, I'd say, decades, probably hundreds of years in the military in one way or another. And as a judge advocate, I saw that under the Obama administration, the rolling out of the transgender policy, and then the rolling back under the previous administration, and what anxiety that created in members of the military, particularly in the Army Reserve that I served with, and who were serving honorably, who were seriously impacted by that rollback. Now, that's not for attribution as a judge advocate. I'm just stating that as something that I observed. So I certainly hope that in the long run, I'm saying this as a commissioner, not as a member of the armed forces, as a state commissioner, that we will see changes at the federal level. We will see more recognition of the injustices that had been meted out to those who receive less than honorable discharges, understanding that there are many who receive less than honorable who deserve it because of misconduct, true misconduct in the military, and striking that understanding and that balance and addressing those who have been mistreated and not valued, who serve their country honorably. That's what we need to focus on. So with that, if there's any questions, and that's my contact information there, anybody can reach out to me. And hopefully by December 1st, without any technical issues, we will have our information up on our website. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to this issue. And it's a pleasure to be on a panel with my good friend Kristin from the state of Rhode Island, as well as Representative Mason, who just met earlier today as we were logging into the meeting. So really commend everyone for bringing this issue to the forefront and making states that laboratory that the federal government learned from. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sadi. I mean, this is such an exciting time. I mean, again, this is going live on January 1st. Like this is so profoundly it's new. It's, years of work, but the potential here and the moment in time that we're at is really so powerful and so exciting. We'll cycle back to everybody throughout the rest of the evening here. And if you all watching have questions for Commissioner Sadi about Connecticut specifically, please put them in the Q&A. I see that the chat is vibrant, and I see a lot of you all are engaging on chat. But help us find your question by putting it in the Q&A, and we'll save all the questions for the end. But Commissioner Sadi, we're going to go to your colleague that you just named next. We're to go from Colorado to Connecticut. And now to Rhode Island. I want to introduce to everybody Director Kasim Yarn, a Navy veteran and Director of the Office of Veterans Affairs for Rhode Island. Director Yarn, if you would do us the honor of just telling us, maybe some of the background on your state's legislation, where you're at, what the bill does, what the legislation does, and just a rundown of what it looks like in Rhode Island. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm so honored to be here. I serve with humility, and I tell you, I use my other brothers and sisters across the nation as a sounding board. I remember when I first took this position back in 2016, we had what you call director orientation. And in that, one of our colleagues, Alfie from the beautiful state of Washington, she said, listen, when a other director calls you, damn it, you better pick up the phone. More importantly, you remember Benjamin's laughing because he heard that simple speech. But more importantly, there are no borders when it comes to serving American heroes. So this is our mission. And I tell you, I believe in the faith, and I believe somebody need to practice something. There is a higher being somewhere. And the scripture teaches us there is no greater blessing than those that are willing to sacrifice their life for the sake of others. And we live in a volunteer force. And like I said, like the distinguished gentleman from Colorado said earlier, we represent a small minority in this station that are willing to do that. And my job as a director along is stand together with other directors to ensure that every veteran has opportunity and their families. And so this is another beautiful thing about this mission, that when we talk about our veterans, every time I say the word veteran, I always say, and our military families, because they are at ground zero and they get the brunt of the things. And so not only am I serving, I got to make sure that my message is for the veteran. My message is also tailored to and catered for our family members as well. So just a little bit about myself. Everybody heard the story about Navy guy, go Navy, and one team. And I joined the Navy back in '91. I grew up a Southern boy from Mississippi. And when I say, Mississippi, as an African-American male, there is no state worse in this nation than the state of Mississippi along those lines. And there's still, that stain on that state will never be removed from how they treated a segment of our population. And so I joined the Navy I left there running. And I tell you, I went to Great Lakes, we call it Great Mistakes, Illinois, and it was a blessing because, I started to understand the realization as a 17-year-old that, there is no such thing as race, color, gender. We serve our nation. And that's why I love my background, because it has our flag. And, you can't tell who's serving in their uniform, regardless of it. In fact, they're standing watch. And this is why when I engage with those that are transitioning back to civilian life, I was like, I felt safer off the coast of some pissed off country than I do in my own home in North Kingstown, Rhode Island, because I stand with 275 other men and women that when I'm sleeping, they're standing watch. You don't get that mentality in the civilian world. So to everybody that's listening, and please, your service matters. And it's our job to lead by example, to lead from the front. I tell you, our governor, she's now the Secretary of Commerce, Governor Raimondo, and then on her inauguration speech, she said how our state, our size is our strength, and to partner with all the other states in New England. And as I also chair, I am the leader of the district VP for 12 states that call, I'll break up our Northeast district. And it's challenging to lead your peers. Make no mistake about it, but it's humbling because we have so many dedicated to this work. And so when we started down this journey back in 2016, my foremost focus was listen to our veterans and our families. And so they drive policy in our state, listening to our veterans and military families. So back in 2019, Governor Raimondo, again, like I said, now the Secretary of Commerce, signed into law legislation restoring state and local benefits, the discharge status of all our service members to that discriminatory policy, like don't ask, don't tell. Let's say establish a process for our veterans to upgrade the discharge through and to get them to an honorable service status. And you heard it before. So our that upgrade status allowed us full benefits at the state level. We have a state-ran veterans home and we have a state-ran memorial cemetery. Our memorial cemetery or equivalent to Arlington National Cemetery, along those lines. And so I am the clearinghouse. My office is the clearinghouse. I don't need a hall pass. I don't need permission. Based on this legislation has enabled me in order to utilize the steps in order to restoring that at our state level. Every veteran and their family deserves access to benefits that they've earned and they've served honorably for this great nation and that they've served. You know, I think it sends a powerful message across the nation that we here, our states, are leading the example to support our veterans and through this process. And establishing that process that enables us to have our veterans at the end of the day hold that head a little bit taller, and that I serve and I live in a state that respects me for who I am, and remove away those facades and those epithets associated with the stigma associated, you know, that you know, some of them say, I was talking to a veteran about this earlier today. You know, she felt as though there's a stain on her entire life and her career. You know, I cannot make amends for what happened in the past. But guess what? As of 2016, I'm on that watch. My job is to be the #1 advocate for all of our veterans and military families. Hence why it's so important that these be cabinet level positions, that we report directly to the governor. All matters in terms of veteran affairs for our state. You know, and it's truly humbling along those lines too, because, you know, these policies that are put in place, you know, they do not depict who we are as Americans and as service members. And, and it's owed to all of us to lead that effort and to partner. And so I know Commissioner talked about it earlier about he getting information from New York State. Well, guess what? We are a copy paste team along those lines too as well. And so some of the other states have reached out to me already to share with my legislation what the steps we've done in order to get this enacted. And I gotta tell you, our General Assembly were phenomenal. It passed with flying colors. We had zero pushback from our veteran population. And that does, again, I think that's a testament to where we are, but more importantly, where we're headed as a nation, and our role is so supportive along that front. You know, and I tell you too, you know, we continue to analyze, you know, the needs of our veteran population along those lines. And one of the areas too that this past year, we passed legislation that extends property tax exemption for those veterans that served during the Cold War. That they didn't serve, they wouldn't have the opportunity to serve during the conflict, because we get in this habit of saying, oh, I'm a war veteran. Well, I serve, well, regardless of where you serve today or tomorrow, you serve, and guess what? You are entitled to benefits along those lines too. And we just passed that earlier this year as well. So I'm happy to support that. So anytime someone asks me, as a reportsman asks me, say, Director, what's next for our veterans? Well, that depends on what our veteran needs are. And again, like I said before, I'm so happy to be part of this panel discussion, and I'm pinning your questions. That's all I have. But again, thank you all for your service and being part of this panel discussion today.
Thank you so much, Director Yarn. Those are powerful words, and I don't think any of us can say that enough, that if you served our country, your service matters, and to the families as well. I mean, that's the business we're in, but it certainly can't be said enough. And I mean, thank you for that grounding in why we do this work, and the overall mission and how important it is, and what you're doing in Rhode Island, and to have zero pushback, to restoring honor to those who've been unjustly discharged. I mean, that is a truly powerful testament to how far we've come. And again, I know so many of us just couldn't see the vision, even 15, 20 years ago. And, it's healing to so many people to hear it. It doesn't wipe away everything, but it is certainly.
I just got to really read this stuff. We talk about, mental health, and health looks different to the other, but, we have got to remove that stigma. And I say this all the time. I'm a big guy. 100 pounds, 6'5", African-American male. We live in a world now where it's okay to cry. It's okay to show weakness. But guess what? We have folks that are in it, that are living in darkness right now because they don't feel they have that voice. Well, damn it, if you have a voice, if you're in a leadership position, you need to step up to the plate and speak on behalf of those that cannot speak or feel as though they can't speak for themselves. And that's, and we serve with humility in order to get this over the finish line. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. And that is so powerful as well. And again, can't be said enough. If we can shift gears and go to, I'm biased to the great state of New York. That's my employment, and also, the tremendous work that's been done here. And also, I am coming from you live from Brooklyn, so that's my whole motif going on here. But I would love to introduce my colleague, Benjamin Pomerantz, who is Deputy Director for Program Development at the New York State Division of Veterans Services. And Benjamin, our agency has been at this for, the law has, the Restoration of Honor Act has been in effect for 2 years. It was implemented, I guess, 1.5 years ago, and you have led the important work of making these judgments, taking in the applications, reviewing the cases. Can you talk some about what you've seen and what what our policy here in New York doesn't do, and some of the surprises that you found along the way?
Certainly, and thank you, Kristin. I'm coming to you live from a bit north of Brooklyn, but yes, we do still have functioning internet way up here in the hinterlands. It's a pleasure to be with so many wonderful advocates tonight, and I want to echo the thanks Ashton made at the beginning for us New Yorkers, for Brad Hoylman in the Senate, and Dee Dee Barrett in the Assembly for passing and supporting and sponsoring and pushing through this important legislation, along with all of their colleagues in both chambers who advocated for it, brought it to the floor, and voted it into success. What we're talking about here is an idea whose time has come in New York and across the country in the states that are enacting restoration of honor legislation. One of the myths that's out there that really is harmful and hurtful is the idea of, well, every veteran out there who's carrying some kind of less than honorable discharge was mad, bad, and dangerous in the service and got what they deserved. And thankfully now we're seeing some important research on this and putting some numbers and some statistics that are just astonishing around this issue. For example, military sexual trauma survivors, 50% more likely to receive misconduct discharges. From 2011 to 2015, according to a Government Accountability Office report, 62% of bad paper discharges for misconduct were individuals who were already diagnosed with either PTSD or a related condition, not an unknown situation, already diagnosed. 62% in that period of time, right? And then when we look at the biased policies and the legacy of those policies when it comes to individuals on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity or expression, there have been reports saying more than 100,000 veterans involuntarily discharged, kicked out of service for no reason other than their sexual orientation or their gender identity or expression from World War II through the end of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell era 10 years ago. These numbers are staggering. And the scary thing about them is, if I were a betting man, I'd wager those numbers are probably shy of the mark when it comes to how many veterans have been adversely impacted by these types of situations. So what does this mean? This means restoration of honor is necessary in all the states that are doing it now, and I hope someday in every state in this country, because there are veterans in your state, no question about it, wherever you are, who are experiencing these situations of being denied the benefits your state offers because of an unjustly issued or unjustly administered discharge from their military service. I still recall 2013, I began working for the state. In my first month of work, I met a veteran who had both a Purple Heart and a less than honorable characterization of discharge. What is this? How can this be possible? Well, don't ask, don't tell. Need I say more? So in New York State, what we have as far as the law itself and the implementation of it. The law focuses on administrative discharges, so OTH, general under honorable conditions discharges, what we're looking at. and specifically for a situation where you have a character of discharge being issued due to the military's policies or actions relating to sexual orientation or gender identity or expression, not just don't ask, don't tell, but the entire history and legacy of the military, as well as discharges that can be tied back to or related back to an individual being a survivor of military sexual trauma, an individual sustaining a traumatic brain injury, or an individual sustaining post-traumatic stress disorder through their military service. We apply the same standard that is talked about in the CURTA memo issued by the U.S. Department of Defense, talking about liberal consideration, meaning when possible, we're looking to grant these things, right? We know, and common sense and logic tells us that in a lot of these situations, we're not going to find that smoking gun piece of evidence that says, oh yes, this is the exact situation that led to this person getting this character of discharge, right? Record keeping about this stuff is often sketchy at best, sometimes non-existent at worst. So we want to look at the entire picture here. And our veterans benefits advisors around New York State, as well as other advocates, including the attorneys who have gone through the State Bar Association training program, have been great about tracking things down like lay statements, buddy statements of, hey, yeah, I served with this person and I witnessed what was going on. I witnessed the discriminatory conduct that was directed towards them. So yeah, it might say something else on their DD-214 about why they were discharged, but I'm going to write to you here in this letter and say, look, I'm telling you what really went on. And the information on the discharge paperwork is a pretext for what actually happened, right? That kind of stuff is incredibly valuable. Statements from family, friends, fellow members of the service, clergy, etc. Lay statements are huge. They can be a tremendous difference maker in these cases. One of the things that we're very engaged with as well, which is an ongoing challenge for all of us, not just in New York, is helping veterans track down their official military personnel file, right? To do our due diligence in this work, we have to see both sides of the coin. We have to see what the military is saying as far as why this person was given the discharge that they were. And so our veterans benefits advisors do a lot of work tracking down those missing records. And we have access to a system called DPRIS, the Defense Personnel Information Retrieval System, where for veterans discharged from any branch except for the Coast Guard, you'll figure, from the mid-1990s to the present day, you can obtain those personnel records through this system in about 24 hours. So it's a great program for veterans of those eras. If records are not found there, we go kind of the old-fashioned way through the National Personnel Record Center in St. Louis, which had for a long time had their doors closed to new requests. We were able to successfully track down some records during that closure period by going directly to the branches of service and actually getting stuff from the military itself. And that worked out in some of the cases that we had as well. But the bottom line with the work that we are doing in New York, and I think I can speak for all the states on tonight in saying this, is our objective is whenever possible to provide these favorable decisions. We want to make certain that we're doing everything in our power to change lives in a positive manner. And I'll share just briefly one story without revealing any personal information, but just to give you a sense of a type of case that came before us and why it was a life-changing experience. The case I'm talking about here involved a veteran who is a survivor of military sexual trauma. The perpetrator in this case assaulted the veteran multiple times while they were both serving aboard a ship at sea. And when the veteran, or at that time, the service member, the sailor, went to the chain of command and said, this is what's going on, that individual, that victim of military sexual trauma was not believed. And in fact, not only was not believed, but this person of higher rank, who was the perpetrator, was put in a supervisory position over the person who was the victim, the survivor in this case. And so when that ship docked, realizing there was nothing that the chain of command was going to do, that person took off, right? Went absent without leave and needed to put time and space and distance between themselves and the perpetrator who was aboard that ship. Military police came, tracked that person down, brought that person back, winds up getting an OTH discharge, and told for a number of years, well over a decade, you are not a veteran. right? Think about the harmful power of those words for someone who is serving and doing well, by the way. Strong performance evaluations, 4 O's almost across the board in their performance records. You are not a veteran. And through the Restoration of Honor Act, we not only restored access to state benefits for this person, but we used that same evidence that was supplied for the Restoration of Honor Act to pursue access to mental health care through the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and also to ultimately pursue a successful application for disability compensation. One of the great myths out there is, oh, you have to get your discharge upgraded by the U.S. Department of Defense before you can get access to any VA benefits. And that's not always the case. There are provisions in federal law, which could be a whole separate seminar, that when they apply to a certain veteran's case, you're able to exercise those provisions and say, VA, in your discretion, open the doors to things like disability compensation or non-service connected pension or certain aspects of VA healthcare. And that's what happened here. So not only a restoration of state benefits, but using that same evidence when it came to getting federal benefits for that veteran as well. And that's the work that we're doing here. That's the work that we're all engaged in, changing lives in that positive way. So for any states that are on tonight that have not yet enacted a law of this nature, I strongly encourage you to do so. And for all of our partners and colleagues on here who already are doing this work, thank you. Let's make positive changes together and keep on doing the important work that we are. Kristin, thanks so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Benjamin. And thank you for all the work that you are doing and that tremendous advocacy. And thank you also for listing out like really the stats, some of the stats on what we're looking at. And, you know, the 100,000 wrongfully discharged folks, you know, is from what anybody can tell, like as you mentioned, a conservative estimate. That's what's on the radar screen. Who did we miss in making those estimates? And so so thank you for running over all that. To make sure that we can get to everybody, last but absolutely not least, we will change channels and hear from Representative Joyce Mason, who represents the 61st District of Illinois. And so thank you so much for being here. And it is, you know, I think we're covering a fair bit of the country here. So it's a beautiful thing. But Representative Mason, like if you could just talk about what led you to this work, what led you to this legislation, some of the stories behind it, you know, what you're able to accomplish. This is yet another piece of legislation that's hot off the presses. So if you could let us in on what's happening in Illinois.
And I apologize for the interruption. If you guys do not mind, if we could just flash the MCLE verification code for our attendees for the credit. I will just flash that one moment here.
Sure.
Thank you.
A note from our sponsors.
All right, for today's attendees, today's MCLE verification code is the letter T. The letter T as in transition, the letter T as in technical. I'll just leave this up for just a few more moments and I'll let you guys continue. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And again, thank you to the New York State Bar Association for really bringing the value here for so many of our law professionals.
Perfect. And for one last time, the verification code for today's program is the letter T as in technology. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Representative Mason, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Kristin. And it is such an incredible honor to be here with all of these panelists. It's really amazing to be a part of this. And I'm so grateful. So my journey with this legislation, and we just passed House Bill 1290. I believe it was signed by the governor in August, and it goes into effect January 1st of 2022. And what it does is it restores state benefits that were were taken away from other than honorable discharges due to sexual orientation, gender identity. So it's one piece of the whole puzzle that we've been talking about. And interestingly enough, I came to this legislation not even aware of this problem. So I know many of you Army veterans. I am not, but I am the proud daughter of an Army veteran. But we never really talked about that stuff. So I was holding actually a women's advisory group and talking about women's issues. And one of the constituents that came just sort of went off trail and started talking about her brother and the struggles that she had because he had received an other than honorable discharge due to his PTSD and his behavior in the military because of it. And I was really floored because I didn't realize that that was even a thing. I knew that there were honorable discharges and I knew that there were dishonorable discharges, right? For those bad behavior people. And I didn't realize that there was this other area. So we started researching it. And then we realized, oh my gosh, traumatic brain injury, military sexual trauma, and now sexual orientation, gender identity. And it absolutely blew me away. And I've been a longtime advocate for LGBTQ plus issues to begin with. So that really struck me. And that was a piece that I just could not believe that 10 years, after Don't Ask, Don't Tell had been repealed, that I guess I just assumed that the benefits were just restored then. Like I had no idea. So we really tried to tackle all of these things though, like New York did, and like I believe it was Connecticut that ultimately did it. I've heard so many great stories tonight that I have to kind of organize them all. But and I thought that we would get pushback from some folks on the opposite side of the aisle from me who, tend to not be as supportive of the LGBTQ plus community. I thought that we might get some old school veterans, really pushing back. I've had veterans tell me PTSD is not real, a variety of things. But what I was most surprised at is the pushback that we got was from the Department of Veterans Affairs itself. And, one individual, one gatekeeper, really just had a hard no, can't be done, can't possibly be done. It's a federal thing. No way, no how, not going to do it. And it was really disheartening because I feel like I approach things not with no, it can't be done, but it can't be done this way, but let's figure out a way to do it. And she just wasn't having it. So we went through, it's too much work. The department's overloaded already. That great fiscal note, it's going to cost too much money. We don't have the information needed, right? Those files are federal and we can't access them. And then it's not our job to make a determination like that. And then of course they can already apply for a federal redetermination of discharge status, which we know is so unlikely to get and takes forever and is really, really difficult. So I kept pushing and kept scheduling more and more meetings and read about New York's legislation and reached out to Assemblymember Dee Dee Barrett's office, they were so kind and so generous in sharing information and really, really appreciated their time so much. And so we went back again for yet another meeting and, got the brick wall, the no, and, we can't possibly make that determination. And then somebody had been on the call from our Secretary of State's office and mentioned that the code for other than honorable discharges existed on DD 214s for sexual orientation, gender identity, and that it was an absolute clear, specific code. And I said, wait, is that right? And she said, yes. And I said, well, then don't we have our answer right there? Because we know for a fact that that is why they were discharged, right? Whereas when you get into PTSD and stuff, it's not that clear cut. And she's, well, yeah, I guess. And I said, so can't we just do this piece, which is so important? Let's tackle this piece, and then let's circle back later. So we really had to push it through. It was still even difficult there. But once we did, I was waiting for some of the other backlash, and actually it passed with bipartisan support. There were very few no votes. It flew through the Senate, and it's been really celebrated all around Illinois. And I didn't know anybody who had been affected under Don't Ask, Don't Tell previously, but I did get a couple of phone calls within days of when we had our bill signing, and quite a few tears shed. So it was just really, really amazing and impactful to hear directly from folks about, again, it not being about those benefits, although the property tax benefits, the education, everything is important because they've earned it, but it is that restoration of, you're important, you did this, you're a veteran, we honor you, we thank you, and you are not less than. And that's the really critical piece of this, I think. And I know that it is going to be really important for the federal government to follow suit and to streamline this process and to make sure that veterans get what they're owed on a federal level. But this is such an amazing start, and I will tell you, I am ready to go with the other pieces of the legislation as well. And I may be calling on some of my fellow panelists for more help and guidance. And I think we've circumvented our roadblock. We have a new director of the IDVA who I am so thrilled and honored to work with. He's amazing, and I think really gets it. So for anybody out there in any other states, I would say definitely, this is legislation that's greatly needed. Join us, call on us. Let's share our roadblocks and how we drive around them or knock them over or whatever. Because the more we do this at the state level, the more likely it's going to continue to have an effect at the federal level. And everybody said so much of the things that I was going to say, so I won't just keep duplicating things. But so honored to be here with you all, and I'm happy to take questions, and just thank you all for what you do.
Thank you so much, Representative Mason. And to hear from you and from everybody, just how much collaboration has happened. States, office, veterans services cooperating amongst each other, and legislators cooperating amongst each other. And I had no idea that there was that much talking back and forth about this, this much needed legislation, but also to hear from each of you how much support, the bipartisan support, in a country that can feel so politically divided, to see how much support there is for this right now, and to see the questions of when is this coming, when can more of this get turned on everywhere, is such a powerful thing. And I want to go ahead and take a question from I want to go to a question that Erica Hoover from Michigan had in the Q&A, talking about it, has there been any direct coordination with VA, with DOD, about, specifically DOD, about the discharge upgrade process, because there has been such a backlog, and, and for these reasons that you, Representative Mason, just got at, to say, why can't this be a much easier fix? And so if Representative Mason or any of our panelists want to chime in to talk about what your interplay has been with DOD or VA about this concept and this movement that has been sparked.
Yeah, I've had really good conversations with, I have both Congressman Brad Schneider and Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. I'm so lucky to have both of them in my districts, and they've both been really, really receptive and open to this and open to working on it. The problem is, I think, things are so gridlocked right now that it's really, really hard for them to be getting a whole lot of anything done. But I know that the work is being done, and my hope is that it will somehow become a priority sooner rather than later. So that's all I have to comment.
I could jump in a couple. So there's several things I want to try to hit three at one time, rapid fire. So we meet on a monthly basis. Our Northeast District, we meet on a monthly basis to talk about these issues. And we work in a collaborative way. We have a portal across all of our states that we share legislation with, and it really is that easy. And I tell you, there is power at the state level with your directors. And I engage all the time to intercede on behalf of our veterans directly with our federal VA hospital and the benefits office to intercede on behalf of our veteran. I know in a chat somebody posted, you got on your DD-214, you got a good conduct medal, yet you got a misconduct. Well, what is that? What message does that send? And so, but that's the type of conversation that we have at the state director level with our federal counterparts to intercede, to take a step back and engage with that veteran. And because no two veterans are alike, but it's our duty, and we work to that and hand in hand with our federal VA partners to get that veteran upgraded and access to those benefits that they've earned along those lines.
If I may, something that Ben Pomerantz mentioned along the lines of what Kristin mentioned is, with regard to the review at the state level, that packet that's put together, that application, those documents can then become part of an application that a veteran service officer, a county veteran service officer, or state one, can then assist somebody with filing for an upgrade or a correction of records or an appeal. So that's what we try to do, just as Ben in New York has done a great job with that. Also, we've been, in Connecticut, our two senators, Senator Blumenthal and Senator Murphy, we've worked with their offices on these issues. I think very candidly that the money issue is something that DC does look at. Of course they do. But also, if states can be successful in doing this, we can show Washington, and I know, and there's someone in the chat just posted that there is interest in working with us. In the chat, somebody from Federal VA is one of the attendees, that if they see it successful at the state level and that it works and that there are, appropriate reviews and consideration, and so then we can show them that, yes, we could do this at the federal level on a broader basis. And the final thing is, I think there also is some concern that with the VA doing so much and these review boards having such heavy, burden dockets, that there's a concern that this will slow down some of the process. But that can be addressed through appropriations and logistical support. So again, that shouldn't stop what's right to do. And what's right is states working together and the federal government looking at this as a possibility at the federal level. Thank you. I know Ben's got his hand raised.
Go ahead, Benjamin.
I want to double down on what Tom just said, that the more states that we can get involved with Restoration of Honor Act type of work, the more we can hopefully get the federal government to realize that when there is a favorable Restoration of Honor decision issued by a state government, that needs to be taken with some pretty significant credibility, be it a discharge review board or a board for correction or the VA in a compensation or pension claim or whatever the body is in the federal level that is reviewing the packet of stuff, the packet of evidence that the advocate is sending in. So the more states that we can get to do this type of work, the stronger that Restoration of Honor Act favorable decision is going to be.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. And I quickly want to go to another question that was raised in the Q&A by Sarah Sherman from Maine, who mentions the report that she was working on looking at LGBTQ+ veterans' access to state and federal benefits in Maine. And she mentions that, that a veteran's story about being pushed out of the Army because of his identity. How meaningful it was to that veteran's family that the veteran's story was included in that report. But the tragedy is that veteran took his life. And so, we know that this is a long history of inequity, and we're just now really getting at trying to restore justice. Can any of you talk about either posthumous judgments or ways to address those for whom it is just too late?
So, Sarah, first of all, thank you very much for your research. Very important, and glad that you are looking into this and providing this report. Two things come to mind for me. One is to make certain that obviously the don't ask, don't tell era was a travesty, and thankfully that law was repealed. And the number of individuals who wrongfully were involuntarily discharged from the military during that time frame certainly is, as we've already said a few times now, probably far higher than what the estimates are that we're actually seeing in the official reports. I think it's also very important to keep in mind, though, that don't ask, don't tell was not the only era in which these discriminatory policies were enforced. And I know in New York State, when the Restoration of Honor Act came out, there was a lot of conversation around, okay, good, this is addressing don't ask, don't tell veterans. Yes, it is, absolutely. But not just don't ask, don't tell veterans. Veterans of any era of service who face discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. So that's one thing. The other is to make certain that you keep in mind that not every veteran who was involuntarily discharged received a less than honorable characterization of service. Right now, there is, I know, one case in particular that SAGEVets in New York State is working on with a veteran who's carrying an honorable discharge. But because that veteran was involuntarily put out of the military early, that veteran did not reach 24 continuous months of service. And consequently, that veteran who needs access to health care is not able to access health care through the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And there is nothing in the repeal of don't ask, don't tell at the federal level that specifically addresses veterans in those situations who, yeah, the character of discharge is fine. It's honorable. That's your golden ticket, right? Well, not if you were put out too early to meet the length of service requirements for certain benefits, like access to the VA healthcare package, like access to non-service connected pension benefits, things that require that length of service, that if but for that involuntary discharge, that service member, that veteran likely would have hit those 24 months. And the only reason they didn't was because of those anti-LGBTQ policies and actions that led to them being put out of service prematurely. So I'd encourage you to look at that as part of your research, because that, I think, is one of the hidden problems that continues to persist. Even after the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, there still are not laws in the books to take care of those veterans who were put out of service too soon.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Do any of our other panelists want to add to that?
Not specifically on that topic, but something that was in the chat or in the Q&A regarding reciprocity, basically a full faith and credit issue. Will Connecticut recognize another state? And candidly, through all these deliberations, I never thought about that, even with my lawyer hat on, as to whether that should be embedded in the legislation. So I'm making some notes here that we should look at, potentially posthumous, as you brought up, a recognition, let a family member or an advocate or somehow allow that. That'll be new legislation be required. But the issue of reciprocity, we all know of the legal wranglings that went on when states were first recognizing same gender marriage. And that issue, is it full faith and credit? So that's something, and we have Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and we all know that our residents go over the state border and move and go back and forth. So that's something that I want to look at in the future in Connecticut, reciprocity to recognize other states that have a statutory provision for OTH, for veteran benefits restoration. Thank you.
It's amazing what happens when people come together from all different places to talk about this. And and thank you, Ashton, for for even coming up with this this event. I mean, this is such a powerful, a deeply powerful conversation that, I mean, with collaboration and crosstalk, you know, I think we're going to see some important action come out of just this event alone. But any parting words, like Director Yarn, if you want to if you want to share any parting words, and I invite any of our panelists to share any final thoughts before we hand this back over to Ashton to close this out.
You know, when we do these, when I participate in these sessions with my other state directors, my staff, they get upset because I come up with all these bright ideas. So when Tom's writing this stuff down, my staff know tomorrow we get back to office, hey, let's pick up the phone and they'll start calling. So, you know, but I just want to echo the sentiments, you know, I tell everybody I can't do this work by myself, and I'm so blessed to have the men and women at the director level serving our veterans. And I look forward to meeting with them on a recurring basis to share this information, to get so many great ideas, that energy to bring back to my state and craft that legislation together. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Any other parting wisdom?
There is a note that I see in the chat box saying, for the first time in nearly 30 years, I feel optimistic, which number one gets me kind of choked up. And number two, I think underscores why we're all here and why we get up and do this work each and every day. I still think back to that time in 2013 when I met that veteran who had a Purple Heart and a less than honorable discharge because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I think of that situation often, that this shouldn't be going on, right? People who serve their country, people who are putting their lives on the line in defense of our freedoms, should not have their freedoms taken away from them and their post-service lives stigmatized because of biased policies, discriminatory policies, and also, particularly in the mental health context, for so long, far too long, a lack of understanding about trauma and about its impact on people's actions and the impact of mental health conditions on the way someone conducts themselves. People being put out for being insubordinate, willfully misconduct, all that horrible stuff, when in fact it was a manifestation of a medical condition. And I think as society changes and science changes, and hopefully just people in general change, we're going to hopefully all feel more and more optimistic as this work leads to better and better news in our individual states and across the country. I'll share one more quick thing, and that is that veteran whose story I shared earlier. After we got that full array of benefits for them, state and federal, both access to healthcare, mental health care, and the disability compensation, she sent an email and made a comment that it was the first time that ever she felt that she could say, I am a veteran, and say it publicly and with authority. That's a lot of years for someone who served this country and served this country well, not to be able to self-identify as a veteran. And that's the wrongdoing that through this restoration we're all looking to correct. And I think with all of us here and all of the advocates who are on this call in the audience, we're going to do it.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. And thank you to all of our panelists, Commissioner Sadi, Director Yarn, Representative Mason, and Representative Ortiz, who had to drop off earlier. I want to say just thank you for your work. Thank you for coming together for this important conversation. My hope is that we all can keep the conversation going. There's so much activity in the chat. There's other questions and comments for folks thrown out in the Q&A. Please check all that out. But because time is finite, I must hand this back over to our wonderful host, Ashton, and with gratitude to him for bringing us all together and allowing me to be part of this conversation. Truly appreciate this.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kristin. Thank you to our panel. Thank you to the Bar Association. This is a home run tonight. There are a couple of other states that were here today listening and chiming in who are working on similar legislation. So this will be continued. There were some great things said tonight, so many great things. I was trying to take notes here and I got a few of them. Making states the laboratory that the federal government can learn from. A powerful message that states are leading the nation to establish this process. The restoration of honor movement This is fantastic. And I'm just so delighted to be part of this program with you. You are awesome. And what a dream it could be what if we're the last generation that has to do this work? What if the next generation is just like cool with everybody and they're more diverse and accepting? So kudos to you. Thank you so much for being part of this tonight. Do I say good night or how do we do this? I think the Bar Association has to close it up. I don't know.
I'll take it from here, Ashton. Thank you all. I just want to thank all of our speakers today for joining us in a fantastic program. This does conclude the program. Please be sure to return to your learning dashboard and enter all attendance verification codes announced during the program to receive your CLE certificate. While you're in the learning dashboard, please take a moment to fill out the evaluation form for today's program. Instructions on how to access it are available in the greetings email you received earlier today. You may also print a copy of the verification form and submit the completed form to registrar@nisba.org to receive your CLE credit. Thank you for choosing New York State Bar Association CLE programs. Enjoy the rest of your evening.